Oh. Are we live yet? Oh. All right, we are live. Wow, this is crazy. Hey, everybody, I missed you all. It's been a while. We had the new year. I took a little bit of vacation, but happy Friday. Today is January 15th, and you're hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. As always, please hang out with us at our Twitter chat over at #CMGR Hangout, where I know a bunch of you are watching right now, so hey, what's up, Twitter peeps? And if you have an idea for a future topic or you want to participate in any sort of way, please head over to our website at www.mycmgr.com. Click on the little button that says participate, and Sheer and I get those forms, and we'll get back to you. So, all right, what do we have for you today? Well, our friend Adrian Spear from Vanilla, one of the CMAT Award sponsors for 2016, by the way, reached out to let us know that they've published a new white paper called the Community Manager Survival Guide. And that's there to help community professionals learn how to handle various tricky situations, including consistently negative and angry members, the consistent line of towing trolls, and suicidal threats, moderation, team fumbles, reports of harassments, legal threats, and the list goes on. We couldn't resist creating a panel around that, and that's why we're here today. So with that, I'm just going to let everyone introduce themselves, starting with Patrick. Hey, Patrick, how you doing? Oh, Patrick, you're going to have to click your mute button, I think. We lost your audio. We got you? Oh, no. No, we can't hear you. All right, well, as we wait for Patrick, we'll just jump over to Sherry.
Hey everyone, I'm Sherry. I'm the community manager at Magento, which is an open source platform for e-commerce, as well as co-host CMGR Hangout here with Brew and Tom.
Awesome. Hey, Kelly.
Hey guys.
Yep, we can hear you just great.
Okay. I'm Director of Community Development along with Jen at Health Union, and we do online patient communities.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Jen, how you doing?
Hey, good, thanks. I am also Director of Community Development at Health Union. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, David, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. David Dewald, a community manager, external community manager at Bid9 plus Carbon Black.
Patrick, do we have your audio?
Do you have my audio?
Yeah, sounds great.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So I'm the community manager at Penny Arcade. We're a media company. We do a lot of big exhibitions in the gaming industry. And I'm also the content manager at Vanilla Forums, who are a great software as a service forum provider.
Awesome. And I am Brew, Director of Awesome with BTC Revolutions, and co-producer here with Sherry for my community manager. So I'm just going to jump right into the first question for you guys, which is, what's your biggest struggle to overcome when you think of surviving as a community manager? What's the toughest thing that you're just desperate for air?
For me, I think it tends to be burnout is one of the things that I see the most often. Like people just there's too much to do, there's too much work, and they either end up kind of getting choice paralysis as what to do next, or they just go, okay, I'm going to peace out, close all of these windows, and see how long I can get away with it. That tends to be a big challenge. That's when you need a vacation, in my experience.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that people tend to feel that because the community never sleeps and it never takes vacations and it never goes on holiday, that they have to be there for it all the time. And the struggle is to realize that you can step away. Sure, something might go wrong while you're gone, but you'll be able to handle it when you get back. But chances are nothing's going to go wrong. So.
I was going to say the same thing, actually, burnout, but maybe from a different angle, in the sense that all the compassion that you're putting in every day and how much that takes out of you is just emotionally draining. So what I do, this might sound kind of simple or cliched, but I try to like laugh as much as possible, and our team makes that really easy, which is lucky. But yeah, and even if it's just doing a little, like if I'm starting to feel burnt in the middle of the day, I could just do something that's energizing, like checking out funny things online, or tweeting about a really great article I read, stuff like that.
I remember I got a great piece of advice similar to those lines here, which is when you feel like you really just don't want to deal with your community anymore, find something to do in the community that's just fun for you. And it doesn't necessarily have a great business objective. It's just, okay, let's have a fun event. Let's do something for a couple of hours. And people tend to really enjoy those, and those seem to be things that get talked about for a long time after the event. And I find that's a pretty good one. But then you have the struggle of coming up with what fun thing you're going to do.
Jen, when you're talking about kind of that emotional drain, I think of just crisis within a community, and having been through a few pretty big ones, it's just like you feel like you sometimes you're never going to see the other side of it and get out of it. And that's for me kind of my biggest fear as far as surviving. So, but unless you've been through it, I don't know. It's hard to explain. Literally, like you said, just how emotionally draining it is. And how depressed you can get if the community's depressed. It's like I don't know. It's sort of, you get plugged in so much that your mood is sometimes based on their mood. So. Yeah,
that's a good point. Also, I think managing resources can be really helpful if you have the luxury of doing that. Like, we have a team approach for moderating, so I think anybody who moderated a ton would get burnt out really easily, but because we have a team that we can go to, that helps out tremendously.
Yeah, in terms of volunteer moderators, I almost always would rather have a few too many than too few, because I like the idea that none of the moderators have to be on any particular day. They can always take a break. They can go, and I'll just say, okay, take a week. It doesn't really matter. Like, if they're not, presumably if they're not being paid, but yeah, it makes a big difference. There's no problem having redundancy in those departments. I don't cut the fat off my mod teams unless they're actively bad.
So, how do you? I'm gonna jump us into number 2 here, which is, how do you stay calm when confronted with or dealing with negative and angry members? So you got some advice on how do we just get all zen on this? And
go ahead, Patrick. I'll steal the show if you don't.
I was going to say that I have one thing that I always keep in mind, which is, no matter how angry I am at whoever this person is, I can't remember any of the other times anyone's made me angry. I know they happened. I know they seemed really important at the time. And I know that they completely disappeared from my memory. So I do that. I go, okay, I'm not going to care about this in a week. Walk away for a little while and then come back. If they're being angry with someone else, I find that's a lot easier to deal with, because those people just kind of need to go. You can, depending on how good their point is, like if they have a great point about the product, if something's really wrong and something's gone terribly, then maybe you need to deal with them a little bit more on even terms. But when you just have those people who are toxic for no reason and they're attacking other users, you don't have to give them too many chances to be a grown-up, and you don't have to teach them how to be a good person. That was their parental guardian's responsibility. You can just say to them, look, you're being awful, and this is not a public service. This isn't being paid for with your tax dollars. Be nice or get out. It's the same thing that you would do in a bar if someone was just coming in and throwing drinks on people and being awful. You wouldn't go, well, look, let's give him a chance. Let's explain what he's doing wrong, and see if he'd like to stop throwing his drinks on people. You just kick him out.
I love that. We have kind of a different angle on that, only because we deal with people who are really can be justifiably angry because they're dealing with horrible medical conditions. So if you are dealing with chronic migraine and it's like the 7th week in a row where you've been experiencing a migraine attack and you get online and you see something that bothers you, it makes sense that when you're in physical pain, you might be even angrier about something. So what we try to do is a couple things. We put ourselves in the place of where the person is coming from. Our VP of Community, Amrita Bomick, always talks about, like, imagine if you were in physical pain, then you were also just having a rough day in general, and then you saw something that online that just was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. We always try to put ourselves in that situation and see, okay, how could this person, maybe they're taking something out of context, maybe this just, rubbed them the wrong way, and we try to see where they're coming from, and we'll either, depending on what the situation is, we'll either explain maybe where the author was coming from, or we will apologize if we did something, if we were in the wrong, or just apologize for, having maybe something was written in a way that it could be misconstrued. And the apologizing thing actually goes a long way, especially if it was something that was legit, and we apologize for it. People take it really, really well. And then the other thing that we try to use is, and this is a term that I learned back when I was working in education, but unconditional positive regard, which is a counseling term, and it basically is just the idea of trying to see the best in someone even when they're not showing that better part of themselves, and believing that it's there and bringing it out of them. So.
And to add to Jen's, we also sometimes take a team approach. Jen and I both work on certain sites and conditions, and sometimes it's just removing ourselves and talking back to our team and Jen and getting their feedback before we respond.
For me, I think that for the most part, people aren't angry at you, usually. I mean, there are instances when you've probably pissed people off, but for the most part, they're not angry at you. They're either angry about a situation, or they're, angry at the product, or just, generally having a bad day. And being able to say, okay, this isn't really directed at me. It may feel like it's directed at me, but it's really not directed at me, is a good way of compartmentalizing it and just tucking it away. It makes it easy to go back to them and say, why are you so angry? And then, they have no right or no way to get out of that without answering it, right? They have to tell you why they're angry, or they just come off as being, an idiot or a jerk or that kind of thing. And generally, once you know why they're upset, you can walk them through it and either find a solution or explain why you can't find a solution.
Just want to remind everyone over on Twitter, if you do have a question for us, just tweet us over to the @mycmgr handle, and we'll try to bring your questions here live onto the Hangout. So our question number 3 is, how do you handle the consistent line towing troll? So kind of love this question. That troll that's you just can't bring out the band hammer yet, but they're always there, either sympathetically trolling, or just sort of stirring the pot. So what are some ways you can handle that type of person?
Move the line.
Yeah, move the line is a good one. My expression for these is Clarksons, because I think they're kind of like the relationship Jeremy Clarkson has with the BBC sometimes, which is they were providing value, and there were various reasons why you couldn't just go, oh, screw this guy, he's terrible, but at the same time, terrible things would keep happening. If they're not providing value, then it kind of becomes an easier decision, where you can say, I find it's good to document what people are kind of doing and go, okay, well, this person may not have done the most terrible thing. They've done 5 slightly terrible things. These things are starting to add up. You're having a consistent negative effect. Start documenting it and start telling them. Start saying, okay, you need to not do this. This is adding up. And if they complain that they're like, oh, you were treating me unfairly, you can say no, because it happened here, it happened here, it happened here. This is not as isolated incidents. These all might be fine, but you're clearly just seeing what you can get away with. The trouble comes if they're a big customer, that can be a problem. if they're providing some kind of value in other ways, if they're a beloved member of the community, that becomes even more important, because you need to be able to demonstrate why something is happening. You need to have a good explanation for it, whether it's to show your boss or it's to show other community members. But I think you can't be too afraid to just get rid of someone, even if they are providing value, because that can be a nightmare. You don't see all of the people that they're turning off with their behavior. You just see, you see the effect where you go, okay, 5 people really love this guy. What if 50 people showed up, saw this person being unpleasant, and went, okay, this community isn't for me. I'm not gonna engage. So yeah, document and then give them the boot. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, I think that, well, I'll take a step back. So at the company I work at, we have one very unique hiring policy, and that came down from the top, and that rule was no assholes. We've worked with assholes. Everybody's worked with an asshole at some point, and our company has just decided that we don't want them, so we don't hire them. And I think that having a rule like that in your community that is kind of open-ended, that says don't be a jerk, or bluntly don't be an asshole, then it gives you some leeway, because you can say, hey, you're kind of stretching this rule here, don't be a jerk, and then you can push them out that way and say, look, and personally, if it's a customer, even if they're adding value, if they're being a jerk, they're not adding value at all. They're detracting. There's no balance. They could be your best community member, and if they go asshole on you, you just need to kick them out and say, you are not contributing. You are a detriment. And sure, you should talk to them first and see if you can get them to come around. But for the most part, if the hurt is more than the help, then they're not good for the community.
What about re-trolling them? Does that ever work?
Yeah, if you want global thermonuclear war.
What about killing with kindness? Like, I mean, is there also an option, like, is to try to like win them over a little bit more?
Oh yeah, you can win over your haters. I mean, I love haters. That's my shtick, right? So, your worst and most ardent detractors are ultimately on your side. They want things to be better. They just suck at communicating it, right? So, you just reach out to them and talk to them. I found that a lot of times if you call them out on their behavior, and I don't mean, even specifically, you can say, hey, why are you angry? Why are you, spamming up the threads? Why are you being so negative? That it kind of forces them to respond, right? They'll either respond even more negatively, and then you've got more ammo to get rid of them, or they'll tell you why they're upset. And, it's start with why, right? Try to get to that why their behavior is the way it is, and then you can say, okay, can you improve that behavior? Or, okay, the door is that way, doors to the left, and you can send them on their way. But I think for the most part, once you figure out what's got them bothered, then you can look for solutions with them. And sometimes it will take some part of them stepping back and not being so negative, and part of it will maybe you stepping forward and helping them in an extra way that they wouldn't get. If there's a problem with the product, then you get the problem identified, and then if it's fixable, it's fixable. If it's not fixable, then you tell them, we just can't fix this. It's just going to be the way it is. And I hope you understand, but we appreciate you bringing it to us, and continue to bring those kinds of things to us, because we will fix what we can fix.
I think in terms of rehabilitation as well, like to follow on to that, as long as someone has a stake in the community, they can be brought around. If they feel like it's important in some way that they're there, if they're getting value from it, then you have the ultimate thing, which is, I can take this away. I don't owe this to you. So talk to me, and we'll figure out what it is. When someone doesn't have a stake in the community, there's nothing you're going to do about that. Like you can't deal with someone like that. Like, oh, I just don't care. Do whatever you want. But and a lot of people will say that when they actually do have a stake, because they know that giving you that kind of leverage means that you can make them behave.
Everybody has a stake.
So yeah, absolutely agree.
They want their 15 minutes of fame. They want to be that internet famous.
True, I guess.
You know? Seriously.
You can get that in a ton of ways.
I think from our perspective, because we are dealing with health conditions, and it's a little bit of a different product, we really try our most to be welcoming, and our last resort is really to boot them. If we have to, we will, but ultimately it hasn't happened very, very often, and it's more with spammers. Are they selling a product or something to our communities, a health product, and then we'll definitely block them.
Yeah, and then the times when somebody, I mean, it's not your typical trolling, because it'll be somebody who's just maybe extra angry about something, or is like, oh, this article is crap, which they're allowed to think that if they think that. But basically, we just always keep, like David mentioned before, it's kind of one of our community rules. We don't put it particularly as concisely as no assholes, but it is in our community rules, which are listed on every page, that while we encourage lively discussion, we also need everyone to be kind to each other. And so if somebody is expressing an opinion that's different from somebody else's, and they're doing it in a way that's disrespectful, we will call them out on it very gently, but very, clearly, and say, as per our community rules, blah, 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 everything I just said, and then typically they'll come around and they'll say, hey, sorry, I'm having a really rough day, I didn't mean it like that, or if it's somebody that does want to be nasty, then clearly it's not the community for them, but so they might like self-select out, but we've rarely ever seen that.
All right. So I'll send us into question number 4 here, which talks about suicidal threats, and really what happens when those pop up in your community. What do you do?
I would say we get those probably relatively a lot, because we're dealing with things where depression can be a comorbidity of a certain disease, and people are just dealing with some really, really painful stuff. So we have a protocol that we use where we're not trained, suicide counselors or anything, so we refer people to the professionals, and then we also try to follow up privately. So initially in the post that they put, we'll say, so sorry that you're having such a hard time. A lot of people find it useful to get support from multiple different places besides just medical professionals, like counselors, blah, blah, blah. And then we refer them to the appropriate, suicide resources or suicide prevention resources. And then we'll try to follow up one-on-one also, just to check in with how they're doing.
Also, the community is very good at following up with these people too. They'll wish them just the best wishes, and I'm kind of making them feel so they're not quite alone, so that really comes in handy as well.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much become like standard operating procedure for most communities today, is that if someone comes in with like that, then it's about getting them information. In the rare case that you really think it's an imminent thing, I have heard of community managers reaching out to the person by phone if they have that available to them, or if they have an address, actually contacting the police. I've heard of that in the past. But that would be an extreme circumstance where I think they would take that, where they generally are, really and truly believed there was some kind of imminent danger for that person.
I've actually called the police on someone once. It was a pretty difficult decision to make. Like it's hard to do something like that. But one of the real problems with dealing with this problem is that it's so sympathetic, and the stakes are so high. And there's also a tremendous opportunity for people who are emotionally abusive to use this to kind of leverage and to get people to do what they want, to get people to pay attention to them. And even professional suicide counselors, psychologists, psychotherapists find it difficult to tell which is which. I've always found it really important to have a rule against any kind of suicidal ideation or any kind of that, and if someone starts to say, well, I think I'm going to kill myself, I'll say to them, look, I have all these resources, and we all have the same resources that we'll give out. I'll say, unfortunately, it isn't fair on everyone else in this community, because none of us are able to deal with that. We can't deal with it from a liability point of view. We're not trained to do it, and it's a huge amount of stress to put on strangers, or even acquaintances and friends. It's very, very difficult stuff. And I remember, like, I had arrived at this policy through a lot of kind of trial and error as to what would work, and it went pretty well, because people tend to realize, okay, this isn't fair. I can't do this, and there are other people I can talk to. But it's always fraught. Every time you kind of go, you wonder which way things are going to go, and whether or not you're going to make things worse or better. But the temptation to help when you're not really able to help can do a tremendous amount of damage, I think.
Absolutely.
Well, I know also just, communities on the different social networks, if you're managing relationships out on there, like, I know, for example, Twitter has a form you can fill out, so that they can kind of deal with it real quickly. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough issue, and I think often it's probably the right call to call the authorities. That's kind of the advice I've seen the most. And it looks like kind of the same thing coming in from Twitter. A lot of people talking about their policy is to alert the authorities as well. So, all right. Go ahead, Patrick. No, go.
I was going to say, there's something to be said for alerting the authorities is a very serious option, and I would only use that if I believed that at the time I did it, where I thought something was imminently going to happen, and that I would be saving a life by picking up that phone. And in fact, on that occasion, it turned out I was wrong, and this policeman turned up, and this guy wasn't going to do anything, but we really, really thought he was. So it's tough sometimes to know if you're going to escalate matters like that. When someone just starts talking about suicide or how they feel, you kind of need to treat it with kid gloves, and give them resources, give them people to talk to first. For me, it's if someone says, I just took pills, or I'm going to do X, that's when I would go, okay, this is serious. This isn't just someone talking about it. But it's definitely, it can be very tough on someone if you accidentally do that too soon. If you alert the authorities when that person's threat wasn't really credible, it's possible to make things worse. And it's important to give people the ability to help themselves out of it, and say, look, here's who you can talk to. So I wouldn't. While I agree that there's a certain point where you have to alert the authorities, and I've been willing to do that. I'd be very, very cautious about doing it. And in the majority of circumstances, this has come up a lot in my communities. In the majority of circumstances, people kind of pull themselves out of it, and the ability to wallow and say and talk about it is, when that's taken away from them, they find it easier to cope. They move on to other things because they have to. And we've had several kind of forumers who were very depressed who came out of it on the other side. And whenever we talk to them about that policy, they say, yeah, no, that was a good thing to hear, was that you're hurting other people by doing this. So you need to talk to someone who can really help you, someone who's trained, someone who knows how to do it, and someone who can really is able to shoulder that responsibility in the way that some random people on the internet aren't, and it isn't reasonable to ask them to do that.
We had an extended version of the question come in from Michael Boyce over on Twitter. Hey, Michael, thanks for hanging out with us on a Friday. Michael asks, here's an extension to the question: are not specific regulations one has to follow, especially given liability issues? So I think the question there is like, in some situations, are there liability issues you need to be thinking about as far as, almost like a direct path you have to take? Does anybody have any experience with that?
I did a small amount of research into it. I think if there's, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't think any of us are. I think if there was a real liability issue here, at some point it probably would have come up by now. But I think the main liability issue is going to be along trying to do too much, might be the first thing. And the other possibility is if things are based around issues like bullying, I think failure to prevent it that could be a liability issue. But I think that's very theoretical. I think in realistic, real-world circumstances, liability doesn't end up being apportioned like that. And I've never heard of it happening. But it's one of the reasons why it's so fraught. No one wants to be blamed either morally or legally for the problem. But one of the reasons why I focus on external resources is because that liability can't be mine, or it can't belong to the community, because we aren't ready to shoulder it.
Yeah, it's kind of a two-way street, right? Are you liable for not doing anything, or are you liable for doing something? I mean, would you rather be in court for? Would you rather have somebody take you into court for not acting when someone said they were going to commit suicide? You could have prevented it, but didn't. So, I mean, I think most everybody would err on the side of, I would rather try and help than to be the company that didn't, or the forum or group that didn't.
Sure, and it's where to draw that line, because you have to offer some help as a human being. You can't just say, okay, this isn't my problem, even when it manifestly isn't. So you have to have something to show. But the fact is that there's great charities out there who are able to really help people. There are a lot of resources available, and I don't think reasonably we can do more, even though you might want to. Obviously, it'd be great if we could solve everyone's problems, but then to refer them to people who are better able to do it than we are. It's tough. It's tough to know where to draw that line. It's one of the reasons why it's such a tricky problem. It's such a tricky issue, because it's so sympathetic, and we all wish that we could do more about it. Every time it comes up, I rarely have a situation where I've gone, oh, that went brilliantly. that couldn't have gone better. It's always difficult. It's always emotionally painful on every side. But I feel like I'm probably talking too much.
No, not at all.
I'm not me.
I'm going to bring in another question here. This is a little bit on the lighter side of things. K. Pathhouse says, when things are going spectacularly great, what do you do? The good also can sometimes be so overwhelming.
When your community's doing well and everything is running smooth, that's when you start documenting, right? You say, this is a success, and you don't share that success necessarily with the community. You share it with your boss. You share it with your boss's boss. It's you got to keep track of those, because in community it can often feel like you never win, or things are never going smoothly, because there's seems to be always something around the corner that especially for customer communities, they so very rarely come in and say, I just want to tell you things are great. They'll more often come in and say, I can't stand the way this works, or something along those lines. So when you get those wins, absolutely celebrate it. Just take 5 minutes and have a happy dance in your cubicle, or get a coworker, somebody, and just say, look, this is like an amazing thing that just happened. And communities can do amazing things. I've seen just amazing things come out of the communities. For people, if someone's in need, I've seen lots of money gone to helping people. We've had communities where people have passed away, and to see communities come together in those situations is often truly, truly amazing. And while it's a sad thing that someone has passed, it's amazing to see so many people come together to celebrate that person and what they knew of that person. So absolutely, if you're having a great time of it, make sure other people know, especially people you work with, because often the only thing you bring to them is, we've got an issue.
I totally agree. We document also, we take screenshots when people put quotes about how wonderful they feel the community is, or that they're not alone anymore, and that they feel really good about being part of the community. So one of the things we did this year was around Christmas time, we sent to our moderators just a really big list of all of these great comments from the community. It's like, wow, look at this concrete stuff that you guys are doing, because it is hard to quantify the warm fuzzy stuff. So I totally agree on documenting. And then also there's this great Talib Kweli quote. I don't remember what song it's from, but he says, if we don't celebrate, we have nothing to fight for. And so I think that's a really good one, just the importance of celebrating, and our team happens to be really good at that. So so that's another thing when things are going spectacularly well.
All right, jump us. Oh, Patrick left. Well, oh, there he is. You're back. All right. So I will jump us into question number 5, which is how do you work with your moderation team when they fumble or they flake out?
Well, for me, the fumbles and the flakeouts I kind of handle differently. And for the fumbles, I keep a mental tally. And it depends on whether or not I feel the fumble is, okay, this is a one-off mistake. So, you know, someone did something wrong, they exercised poor judgment, or is this a sign that this person is unsuitable? Because we all make mistakes. We all mess stuff up. And I think it's the two sides of dealing with it are dealing with the moderator themselves and dealing with the community. And if it's a pretty bad error and you want to keep the mod on, then you do have to be able to say to the community, here is why. You have to be able to apologize for it, and hopefully the moderator apologizes. And you need to be able to speak to the moderator in such a way that they don't just feel like they got yelled at and they'll never do anything again, because a lot of the time they're volunteers, and you don't really have any cause to yell at them. And so you tell them what they did wrong, and you explain to it, and you say, okay, this obviously can't happen again. If you think there's an underlying cause for whatever the issue is, you try and address that rather than just a symptom of the problem. And then you tell the community, like, we all know this wasn't okay, something bad happened, and we're taking steps to make sure it doesn't happen again. If it's just a flake out, those are much more annoying. But if you, as I said before, I don't mind a little bit of redundancy in my mod team. If someone takes a few months off, that's okay, as long as they're not the only person responsible for something. And a lot of the time, I have moderators now who do very little in terms of locking threads and kind of deleting spam. But whenever they speak about something in the mod forum, it comes from a lot of experience, and it's very wise. And I think those are definitely worth having around. So yeah, the flake out is very situation dependent. Whereas if someone just doesn't post for a month, then I'll just take them off the team, especially if they didn't tell anyone first, because that's one of those signs of a lack of responsibility. You know, that they're really not into this that much, and that's fine. You can't be mad at them for it because it's often volunteering. Just get rid of them at that point. Just say, okay, thank you very much for all the work you did do. It seems like you're not that interested anymore, so I'm taking you off the team to see if we can find someone else who is.
So for us, it's a bit different because a lot of our moderators do deal with the actual, or have the actual condition that the community they're moderating is based on. So if somebody is going through, or is having a rheumatoid arthritis flare, or is in the midst of a really bad migraine attack, obviously we don't expect them to show up at certain times, and so it's less of a flake out and more of just like a completely, totally legit reason for not being able to do the work. So what Kelly and I do as community managers is we'll keep like a really close eye and make sure any comment that's nearing the 24-hour mark, we'll jump in and respond ourselves, which you might be thinking, well, that gets crazy. How can you, so we were able to, luckily, we were able to add an even bigger team approach, and now we're hiring moderators that are going to be cross-sites and working on the stuff that are more community professionals instead of experts in the condition, and we're training them on the condition. And then, so again, it goes back to, managing our resources, and we do have that luxury of being able to do that, and the team approach.
I think, too, our patient advocates, they're going to have the best answer.
Yeah.
So we always want to have an open door kind of policy where if they have a question at any time, just email us, and we'll try to work on it together. And it's also kind of rewarding, not rewarding, but when they do have an awesome comment and the community responds very well, we want to make sure that they know that this went over, and the community, just how much they appreciate their replies and comments and all that.
All right. Just a reminder again, keep those questions coming in. We'll definitely have some time to bring them in. While we wait for your questions, we'll jump into question number 6, which is, what plan do you have in place to handle reports of harassment, like a code of conduct or something like that?
Well, personally, I think this is one of the most important issues that's going to be coming up more and more, because it's a very hot topic in the media right now, and there's a lot of very, very big companies who are fumbling very badly in how they deal with harassment. The way I look at it is that the community is like a bar I run, or it's like my house or my garden, and I can't allow someone to be harassed in that sense. So we're pretty clear on that. You're not allowed to. We don't let people use our community as a dating service, because we just got every female who posted for a while you could guarantee that the same group of usual suspects would try and get them on a date, to less than raucous success generally. It was so we just said, no, you can't do that. That's not what this place is for. You have to be very careful about it. A lot of the time, frankly, the resources are there to combat abuse. Certainly in the case of Twitter and Facebook, they could do it if they wanted to, but they really don't. And that's a big problem. Like, you have to have the will to be able to say, this isn't okay. You have to be able to define it and say, this is something I think is all right, this is something that isn't. And all the various different kinds of harassment tend to be pretty clear-cut when it comes to it. If someone's making someone else's life unpleasant, making them not want to be in the community, you need to have the will to do it. You need to say, this is not all right. From a resource point of view, if you have a really large volume of posts, it can be difficult to see that stuff. So creating a culture where anyone who's being harassed feels like they can come and talk to you about it is important. A lot of people who are harassed and abused, of course, don't ever tell anyone because they don't feel like they can, and that's something that's really tricky to deal with in a community. And I'm known as being an incredibly grumpy person, so I tend to try and make sure people know, like, that's an act. If you need me, I'm here. I'm going to take that very, very seriously, and just hope that other people are able to step in and say, look, something bad's happening here. But if in the cases of the very, very large companies who are obviously not taking a stand on harassment, not dealing with it very well, it's because they want to. And I think anyone who says that it's not possible to do is selling you a bridge. It's absolutely possible to let people know that abuse and harassment is unacceptable. It's not an incredible resource burden compared to a lot of other things. It can absolutely be done, and it should do. I think it's table stakes. Ran over.
Good rant. Yeah, I don't have much to add. I've always kind of associated a community with like a house party, inviting people to a house. You have every right to walk up to somebody and say, hey, you can't really do that in my house. And if they continue to do it, you can say, you're going to have to leave. And if you just kind of treat it that way, you're going to be good. I think, in a community, and you just let them know that there's unacceptable behavior and you're doing it, and you need to stop. I like to say that a community manager is a benevolent dictator. You want to do the best for everybody, but ultimately you've got to draw the line sometimes and say, yeah, it's my party, my house, my world, and you are no longer welcome. And sure, you're going to try and come back, and I'm going to kick you out, but at some point you're either going to straighten up and act right, or we're just going to keep playing this game of cat and mouse, and it's going to get boring for you as boring as it is for me.
I mean, there's an analogy that I stole wholesale from Jeff Atwood, which is, if you run a bar and a bunch of bikers move in, you have two choices: either you kick them out, or now you run a biker bar, because people won't want to stick around. And even if you think you can do the Reddit type thing, where you just push all the bikers down into the basement, that's not going to matter because the police are going to come through your main bar when they raid the place. It's absolutely going to taint your brand or your community or whatever you're trying to build. So appeasement doesn't work in this circumstance. You're saying, okay, well, as long as you're over there harassing people or being abusive, it's a real hot button issue. It's going to keep getting more and more so. And I don't think there's any excuses. I think that the companies that aren't taking care of it need to stop trying to make them.
I thought that sounded like a pretty cool bar, but
well, there's nothing wrong with biker bars.
You know what's funny is one of the places I used to live, they had a Home Depot that went out of business, and what they did is somebody bought it and they converted it into 6 bars. So there was a piano bar that was right next to a hip-hop bar, which was right next to a country line dance bar, which was right next to a Coyote Ugly frat boy kind of a bar, and just depending on which mood you wanted to be in, you could go from different bars and get a different experience. But, you know, you would think that having 2 different cultures, you know, like a hip-hop bar right next to a country line bar might cause some issues, but it actually didn't. And it gave people a lot of options. If they wanted to, you know, if they met somebody in the rave bar and they wanted to talk to them, they could actually walk across a hallway, go into the piano bar where they could actually hear each other and talk, and it just worked out amazingly well, surprisingly. But
I really thought that was going to be a disaster story when you started.
No, it actually worked really, really well. It was surprisingly well done. So.
Awesome. Michael asks you guys, or all of us, another question, which is how do community managers survive the issue where they find themselves siding with their community against their employer? And has that ever happened?
It's happened to me. It happened to me when I was working in the gaming industry. And I think that you'll find that happens a lot more in that industry than anything else. Because sometimes we can see the writing on the wall before the developers and the marketing team can, right? So we can, if someone announces a new feature and we see a significant amount of negativity, sure, some of that's just negativity because they hate change, but if we see a really strong uprising and we feel like it is going to be far worse than they know, we will go back to them and say, if you do this, you will have problems. And, you have to fight for them. I think that any company that truly values the people that they're building their products for, then they should empower their community manager to be able to come back to them and say, no, you're wrong, or no, that won't work, and and not give them a hard time about it. I think that that one person probably knows more about your customers than anybody else. Marketing is looking at them as a way to, marketing is for people who are not yet your customers, right? So their job is to get the customers and bring them to you, and community is about keeping them, right? So if you go as a community manager to your managers and say, I don't think this is going to work, and if they don't really kind of sit down and listen, then I think you have a culture problem in the company. Because if I did that today, I know if I said I've got a real problem and I went to my boss, it would start conversations to see what could be done to either mitigate it, if it was, or fix it, just lessen the blow. Maybe if it's gonna come and there's no choice about it, then you're just gonna have to deal with it. But you can certainly change the way that it's communicated to the users. But yeah, I've been in that situation where I've gone back to a boss and said, if you do this, it's going to cause problems. And I was real fortunate that they listened. And we were able to go to we had outside developers. We were able to go to the developer and say, I think this is going to be a problem. Came up with solutions that were better. They weren't perfect, but at least we could go to the community and say, we listened. Here's the solutions we have, and here's why we have them, and why we couldn't maybe do it this way, but this is also why we feel these changes were important. But that's just me being real passionate about my job. So,
Yeah, right on. That's a great answer. I think I'm going to just lead us into our last question, and it's perfect timing for it, which is what's your escalation path when receiving or witnessing a legal threat in your community?
I don't really have one today, but in the past, we would immediately ban them from the community. We would send them an email that says this is the address and phone number and email address of our legal department, and we would pass all of the information about that user to our legal department. We would just shut them down and kick them out. It's the safest way.
Yeah. I've been embroiled in a court case, I think, for about 3 years, which I won't talk about too much, but it involves giving up user information and us refusing to do it. Yeah, legal threats is the same thing. That's a forum isn't an appropriate venue for those legal threats. 99% of legal threats I have received went absolutely nowhere, with the caveat that it's possible that my boss has just been settling them all these years. But mostly it's people trying to scare you, right? And the great thing is that they've given you a vehicle right away to say to them, okay, you can't post.
Uh-oh.
Looks like we lost Patrick at the end there.
Yeah, I think I know where he was going with it, though.
Yeah.
You know, you give them a vehicle to remove them from the community. When I worked in the gaming industry, we would get those kind of legal threats all the time. I'm going to sue you because my account got hacked or something along those lines. And, you know, by shutting them down, not only would we kick them out of the community that they were in, we would also kick them out of our games. And miraculously, when that happened, they would come around real quick and say, oh, well, you know, I was just kidding. I still want to play your game. I was just venting. So, you know, that's probably the best deterrent. He's right. Most legal threats aren't truly legal threats. But as soon as he gets back in, I'll let him finish his thought. But I kind of think that's where he was going with it.
I think you mentioned one thing there, David, that was really important to note, which is that you need to be on the same page with your company about whoever those troublemakers are, so that if someone's causing problems in one area and they're blocked there, they're not allowed to cause problems in another area. I know that's something that we really work on to make sure if someone is stealing code here, they're not allowed to continue to participate here, etc.
I think that's a good point, is that, you know, if you can, you know, you can block them in all the ways that you can block them, you know, and you know, people are like, you know, it's the whole free speech argument. Why can't I say this here? You know, it's free speech. And it's like, no, not free speech. Sorry. I've offered to help people set up their own forums on the internet, or set up their own communities. As you know, if you don't like the way I'm doing it, I will help you set it up so you can run it the way you want to. And they typically balk at that because, you know, either that or they try and they realize how hard it is, and then they come back and say, I'm sorry. So, you know, it's just one of those things. You have to kind of draw that line and say the behavior is not acceptable, and we're not going to let you in any of our, you know, parties. You know.
Yeah, you're not offering a bespoke community for that one particular person, right? I oftentimes, you know, working for a forum provider, I offer people a discount. I say, if you want to start your own community, I can get you. I reckon I can get you 15% off, so you can see how much better you could do it.
Yeah, that's what I do too. I'm like, you know, I will. Here's some free forum software. Here's a real cheap internet host. I'll even pay the first couple of months for you if you want, because it's only going to cost me maybe $20. You set it up. I will help you get it started. I will help you a little bit, and then it's all yours. And you go from there. And you know, they either give up right at the start, or they try it for a month or two, and then they give up and come back and say, I'm sorry. And then they're so much nicer because they realize just how difficult it is to really and truly run a community. I mean, that's the biggest insult in the world, right? It's like, you suck as a community manager. I could do better. And it's like, okay, Come on board. You think you can moderate better than me? Come on in, moderate. And I've had people that have been like that have said, you suck, you can't do this right. I bring them on board. I say, all right, fine. You don't like the way we do it, or you think we're doing it wrong. Here's the rules, the same rules that were always there. Now you have to enforce them. And they've come around, and they've been some of the best moderators I've ever had. But that takes a big leap of faith, because you're giving somebody who hasn't really shown that they can handle that kind of responsibility a chance to do that. And so, if you feel comfortable enough, I would do that. I mean, there's no harm, right? If they screw up as a moderator, you
High
can
risk.
take them away. So. But you'd be surprised how often that turns them around and they realize that it's not easy. And they're not even in the thick of it as a true manager. They're just moderating a few posts.
It's a definitely high risk, high reward, I guess. I don't think I have the spirit and soul for that.
All right, guys. Well, that pretty much runs us out of time for today. Thank you so much. This has been a great hangout. Definitely can't wait for the recap. And thanks so much for your time and just hanging out with our community. Before we break, Sherry, can you just kind of give us a little plug about the 24-hour broadcast for CMAD and kind of what's going on?
Sure. In case you don't know, January 25th is Community Manager Appreciation Day, which is something that Jeremiah Owing started a few years ago. And we are actually doing 24 separate panels that day, starting at midnight Eastern, going all the way through. So if you go to cmad.co, you'll be able to find all the information there. There are, I think, 3 days left to nominate anyone for a Community Manager Award. Those are actual physical awards that we send out. Pretty cool. Come with a bunch of swag from the sponsors. And the schedule is there as well. If you're hosting a meetup, you can list it there. There's just a lot of information there from events going on around the world. So.
Awesome.
Yep.
So, well, guys, have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.